thank you for offering me the platform to make so many of the speeches that I felt I wanted to make to communicate important issues to the community. And thank you for CEDA for providing that platform. CEDA occupies a really important space in the political discourse of the state and the nation. Speech making is a bit of a dying art. It's now tending to be replaced by, 140 characters or the other forms of instantaneous communication. So thank you so much for preserving that part of our political discourse, because sometimes complicated things do require a little bit of development, and you do provide that platform. Can I acknowledge Professor Colin Sterling, the Vice-Chancellor of Flinders University, and of course MC of this session. And Colin runs a progressive and dynamic tertiary institution. And when I think about South Australia's economic possibilities, it's extraordinary how intertwined our future is with our tertiary institutions. And we look very much forward to working with you, Colin, and your institution. And finally, Mr. Raymond Spencer, Chairman of the South Australian Economic Development Board, and other board members who I understand has already spoken to you. And Raymond, I understand, has touched on the 10 economic priorities for South Australia. And I do want to single out just one of those economic priorities for special attention today. And I'll return to that in a moment. But can I also acknowledge Mr. Michael Blythe, Chief Economist and Managing Director Economics at the Commonwealth Bank. The people I've spoken to, Michael, tell me that they very much enjoyed your informative presentation, so thank you very much for that. I want to select out what I regard as possibly one of the most important and also the most successful of the 10 economic priorities that we've chosen for South Australia's economic development, and that's our vibrant city. And the reason I want to focus on that at this time of all times is that we're in the middle of our festival season, where our city really is being showcased to the state, to the nation, and increasingly to the world. But also because it sits at the heart of just about everything else that we seek to do in our state. It is a massive enabler of all that we want to achieve for our beautiful city and state. The scale of our ambition for our capital city, in my view, is synonymous with the scale of our ambition for the whole of our state. I'm firmly of the view that modern regions compete on the attractiveness of their capital cities. Not just their physical attractiveness, but the way in which they project themselves to the world, the values they project to the world, their offering to the world, and their offering to their citizens. We're very fortunate, as I said, to be in the midst of another extraordinary festival season. And in this precinct, which is surrounded by the entertainment precinct, we have the great pleasure during this so-called Mad March season of having a number of events which all collide at the same time. And it's like an orchestra. Sometimes it's a little bit out of tune when you've got V8 together with the high arts, which we found to our displeasure one night when we were trying to listen to Philip Glass, I think, and they were revving up the engines. But all of it together, mashed together, creates a sense of vibrancy and excitement about this beautiful city and state. And it does cover the A to Z of cultural experience. WOM Adelaide, the Fringe Festival. Fringe, the second largest festival of its type, second only to Edinburgh. And courtesy of a fantastic announcement, we're going to make sure that we retain that international position as a leader in this cultural expression. Of course, we also have a festival which I think many people are describing as having recovered its mojo, a festival which has set for itself an extraordinary ambition to be of excellence and to projecting once again an international and national image of our city and state. In fact, we had the great news today. Saul is selling out fast, and about 45% of the tickets are going interstate, so we'll be seeing a lot of people coming across the borders to witness what will be an extraordinary artistic event. And what that provides for our state is a sense of creativity. And this artistic creativity is spilling out all across not just our city but our state. We're seeing it in the extraordinary explosion of live music in the city. Live music is absolutely taking off in this city, and it's finding its expression in the small bars, in small venues which are popping up, new creative spaces where people are taking their artistic talents and sharing them. And off the back of that, they're creating businesses and opportunities which are sustaining themselves here in South Australia. And we're doing everything we can to throw petrol on those flames. The number of live gig musics have increased by 15% in recent times. We're seeing smaller boutique music festivals like the Porch Sessions popping up and succeeding. And what we're doing to make that happen is to remove red tape, which means that if people want to grab a guitar and get into a premises, they don't have to fill out 1 million forms to actually get a gig going in a small venue. You've seen what we've done with small bars, 120 new licences popping up all over the city as young entrepreneurs, often with those beards, what do they call them? Hipsters, who come up with great cocktails and create great little bars where we can hang out. So that creativity is also, the artistic creativity is a short step away from entrepreneurialism. And what we know is that we're seeing across our city and state many more people that are seeking to take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging. The other thing that we're seeing in our city, which once again is at the heart of so much good that's happening here, is the livability of this metropolis. And that's got a lot to do with an integrated transport and urban land use planning ethos, which puts design at its centre and which involves a very important partnership with a key player in the centre of the city, which is the Adelaide City Council. We made a strategic shift 5 years ago when I first was appointed to this position to end a period of essentially war with the Adelaide City Council and enter a strategic partnership with the Adelaide City Council. And the results have been immediate. We've got a facilitative development plan for the City of Adelaide, which is allowing building heights to be much more easily exceeded. We've seen much more interesting design emerge in the city. We've seen an extraordinary increase in the amount of development approvals, totalling $1.12 billion, almost 3 times the figure for 2016. And the value of approvals for major private sector developments in Adelaide broke the $1 billion mark in 2016. So we're actually seeing that on the skyline of the CBD. And these cranes aren't the public sector cranes that we've been used to seeing along this riverbank precinct. They're private sector cranes, driven by growth and opportunities associated with this city. People that are attracted to what is on offer here. They want to now live in the centre of what has been created, the vibrancy that has been created, the sense of creativity that's emerging from all of these young people that are responding to the opportunities that exist. The other element of the city that I think is increasingly becoming understood is the values that it presents around its clean and green image. We set ourselves, together with the Adelaide City Council, a very bold ambition. It was an ambition to be the world's first carbon neutral city. And that means taking all of our forms of energy generation, our transport systems, our waste systems, and seeking to replace them with renewable systems of generation and systems of offset, carbon offset. That involves doing new things in new ways. And the technological change that flows from that creates jobs and opportunities. Businesses can emerge off the back of those particular technologies. It also itself contributes to the livability of a city. A bus fleet which is driven by electricity is quieter, creates less fumes, provides a much more peaceful and pleasant place to be as you move in and about the city. So cleanliness and our green credentials are a value that we project from this city. The other element of the city, which is an incredibly important part of its success, is its capacity to be connected with itself, with the world, and with the suburbs. And we're doing that through the expansion of our public transport network. A public transport network which we're seeking to recreate along the lines of the old public transport network which was so pervasive back in the mid-50s. To make sure that it is easy to come into this city and to be part of all that's on offer in the middle of the city. One of the features of South Australia is that it is fundamentally, within its broader metropolitan area, a city-state. Over 200,000 people come into the city every day for its working week. And increasingly, people understand that it's the radial nature of the city means that they can come in and be part of all of the good things that this city has to offer. Whether it's the infrastructure investments we've made in the riverbank, the Adelaide Oval, the Convention Centre, the cultural institutions along this precinct, a radial city connected better through a high-quality public transport network provides opportunities for all South Australians as they seek to regard the city not just as something other, but something that they can enjoy and be part of on a regular basis. The other sense in which we are connected and increasingly connected is through the way in which we connect ourselves through the internet. The ultra-high-speed internet associated with Gig City, which gives us broadband speeds 100 times current average speeds, 10 times the promised speeds for the NBN, is now a reality in South Australia. Building on the back of the SaberNet network, a South Australian tertiary education facility partnership, we are now making sure that we can connect out to a series of nodes around Adelaide and suburban Adelaide. So this connectivity between the city and the rest of the state is absolutely critical. The other element of our city which I think projects an important value is a smart city, a city that values its tertiary institutions, its commitment to learning and the acquisition of knowledge. And I've just come from an extraordinary ceremony. We've just opened the University of Adelaide's Medical and Health School, which sits next to the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute building, which in turn is next to the University of South Australia's Allied Health School. Together, that precinct with the new Royal Adelaide Hospital creates one of the world's greatest biomedical precincts. And indeed, the whole of this particular precinct comprises one of the great university cities of the world. This is an extraordinary opportunity. If there's been one thing that's changed the face of the city of Adelaide, it's been the students that are now cascading into our city. Coming to our city for the excellence of our tertiary institutions, but also because of what our lifestyle has to offer here. And so a smart city, a city which is committed to learning and to the acquisition of knowledge and ideas, which creates the jobs and skills and prosperity of the future. But this brings me to another incredibly important element of our city and indeed our state. And that is the way in which we have created a sense of social harmony. We've learnt to live together, probably one of the greatest achievements of South Australia, our multicultural society, our ability to welcome people from other places, to have them come here, to keep everything they love about their culture, but just simply add to that their South Australian identity. They can even keep their accents, Colin. But this is something that is an offering not just for all of us that we can enjoy as new people come here and become part of shaping the South Australian identity. It also represents a massive offering to the world. And as Colin identified, think of an overseas student travelling from abroad and considering the choice between the United States and South Australia. Think of what they can see in terms of the acceptance, their livability of their lifestyle, the affordability of what's on offer here, and the excellence of our tertiary institutions. This represents a competitive advantage for the world. People can come here because we have found the solution to that vexed question of how we learn to live together. And this isn't something that's happened overnight. It's not something that my government claims as an achievement. It's something that has been worked on for the last 50 years. 50 years of commitment by governments of all persuasions, investments in ensuring that we protect and preserve this enviable lifestyle, and we accept and welcome those that come from other places. And finally, in this incredibly interconnected world, the other values that we express from our city is the notion of outward lookingness, to look to the world. So we take all these values, we take our livability, we take the vibrancy of the city, which is increasingly evident, we take the creativity of our artists and our entrepreneurs, and we project that to the world. And we do that through our international connections, through the way in which we reach out to the world, the cultural relationships that we make with cities and states around the world, and increasingly through the infrastructure associated with our airport. The increasing number of direct flights to the world makes South Australia much more accessible and facilitates these relationships. But fundamentally, it's a value. It's more than the physical connections. It is a value. It's a value of openness. And that's what this city projects. And in my view, this is the recipe for South Australia's future prosperity. A smart, connected, vibrant city that understands its values, that values its livability, that continues to invest in its peace and harmony and projects these images to the world. And the truth is it's working. And I want to tell you something about what's been happening in South Australia, because it doesn't necessarily accord with the common representation of South Australia. What we've seen in 2016 is that South Australia had the second highest level of jobs growth amongst all of the states, second only to Victoria. More up-to-date figures released last week show that there are 11,400 more people employed than at this time last year. We've now had 17 consecutive months of jobs growth. What that means is every time you look at the TV and you see Coca-Cola, Chrome, everybody that gets prominence, every single one of those jobs that has been lost have been replaced, and we've grown jobs on top of that. None of that would be apparent from the way in which our state is represented in the popular media. We've now got more South Australians employed than ever. Last year, our gross state product cracked $100 billion for the first time. And there are other elements of the economy which are looking up and show solid prospects for the future. Oil and gas expenditure, after a very substantial period of depression, is significantly up. The grain harvest is forecast to be the strongest on record. And what we're also seeing is a state where our tourism sector is growing the fastest in the country. Tourism is one of those sectors which responds directly to marketing, and we have put an enormous effort into the marketing of our beautiful city and state. Jobs in the tourism industry have increased by 4,000 people in the past 2 years, the best growth rate in the country. So more than 430,000 overseas and interstate visitors came to South Australia in the 12 months to September 2016, which is a record. We also know, courtesy of the ANZ Stateometer, that our state economy is ranked third among all states and territories. And last month's Census Business Index showed that confidence among small to medium local firms is at a 3-year high. So there is change going on in the South Australian economy. It's unnerving for those people that are the subject of the negative element of the change. It's exciting for those people who are at the positive element. And this is where I want to address the political environment. Because everything I've just told you may be well and good for those people who are the winners, if you like, in the growing parts of the South Australian economy. But what of the people who are missing out? What of the people who, having lost a job in Holden's, find it difficult to get a job in the growing ICT company? They lose a job at Coca-Cola, but find it difficult to obtain a job in a growing area in the food industry in a part of regional South Australia. The capacity for us to give a hope and a sense of security for people who have been displaced through economic change is at the heart of the current political dynamic that's going on in this nation at the moment. And it doesn't surprise me that we see the rise of Trumps and Pauline Hanson and essentially the right-wing populism that's essentially gripped much of the world in circumstances where working people have lost faith in governments to protect them and their basic interests. This is at the heart of what is happening. I mean, Pauline Hanson was always picking up between 4 and 12% of the vote, depending on whether you're in Queensland or somewhere else. That was the rusted-on xenophobic vote. She had that in the bag. What she's added to that, with her polling now in Queensland at 26%, and possibly even higher in places like South Australia, higher than the 4, so I'm up around 12 maybe in South Australia, is dispossessed working people who are wondering about what's the future for themselves and their families. And she hasn't had to do anything for that. She just looked like somebody that might be interested in them. Because it's frankly true that nobody else is talking to them. And so we need to, as a community, if the business community want to see significant change, and it's fine to say, oh, well, you know, people don't know what's good for them, you know, they're turning their backs on things which are good for the economy. But unless we're able to meet that question, unless we can actually deal with the dispossession of those people who feel they're dispossessed, they are going to do what they did in the United States and Britain. They're going to turn over the card table because they're going to say, how could it be any worse? Well, we need to first tell them, well, actually, it could be a whole lot worse. And maybe President Trump is revealing that, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, things are pretty bad for working people in the United States. They haven't seen a growth in real wages for about a decade. And many of them are facing displacement for their jobs and opportunities, and they can't see a way of moving out. And when these people are interviewed and they say, why are you still staying in this town without a job? They say, well, that's where I grew up. That's my community. I don't know another place. This is where my sick mother is. This is my community. So we have to look at our responses to dislocation from the perspective of people and community. If we don't do that, all these other things about a vibrant, outward-looking city that's connected into the international economy will look like a different planet. And it will be no solution. And the people that are dispossessed will rise up and just upend the card table. So that is our challenge. It's a challenge for policymakers like me. We can come up with our plans, and this is a sound plan, and I think it's working. But if we don't look after people and take us with them, it will all be for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Some very, very important thoughts there. Now, I'm sure there are many, many questions around the room. We've got 2 rules for the questions. We don't have very long, so the 2 rules are the question should at least be a question, and hopefully should be short. So, who would... Yes, please. Table 13.
Premier, thank you for that speech. It's always good to know that it's a fabulous place to live. We know that there's been a blame game around energy in this state. I just had a question for you. Do you take any responsibility at all in your government, even the smallest skerrick of responsibility?
Yeah, I always find it interesting. People start talking about the blame game at about the point when they're losing the argument. When they were kicking the living daylights out of me and blaming Labor and renewable energy for everything that was going wrong, it was all a whole lot of fun, and nobody was talking about the blame game. When we counterattacked and actually pointed out the difficulties with the national electricity market, all of a sudden they wanted to stop the fight, and because it looked like, you know, it was all getting a little bit rough. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep telling it how it is. We've had load shedding in New South Wales last week. We had the Victorians, where the National Energy Market Operator got on the phone and said, we're going to black out Ballarat and Bendigo. We've got price spikes in Queensland that are going through the roof. We've got unplanned closures of power stations all around the nation, 10 of them, only one in South Australia. And they want to point the finger at me. This is a broken national electricity market. And I tell you one reason why it's broken, and that is the political class in this country have not got themselves organised to put a price on carbon. And every intelligent thinking person in the national electricity market knows that you need to put a price on carbon if you're going to send the investment signals necessary for people to make the investment in new plant and equipment to ensure that we have energy security. That's the simple equation. It's the simple equation. And I tell you why we don't have a price on carbon. It's because at the moment, a Prime Minister who actually believes in a price on carbon is so utterly distracted by the internal divisions within his own political party that he's not game to do it. He knows that we should have a price on carbon. He even advocated for the very scheme that I currently advocate for in 2009, which is an emissions intensity scheme. And he knows that that will actually be the national solution. But he can't do that because he's got a one-seat majority and he's got a group of crazy right-wingers that will slit his throat if he even mentions that climate change is real. So that's what's going on, and I am going to call it out because it's not in the national interest and somebody needs to bell the cat on this. Now, if you're interested in how it will work, an emissions intensity scheme does this. It essentially changes the rank order between essentially coal and gas. And so what happens is, in the national electricity market, which is paralysed at the moment because nobody, to give you a great example, the power station at Hazelwood that's about to close in March needed about $400 million worth of investment to keep it going. The investors weren't prepared to invest in it because they didn't know what the future looked like. As soon as you put a price on carbon, what will happen is people will be able to then, investors will be able to put essentially that into their economic modelling, and they'll be able to forecast how long their coal-fired power stations will run. They'll be able to build new gas-fired power stations. They'll be able to turn on more efficient gas-fired power stations like Pelican Point, the most efficient gas-fired generator in the nation, sitting there mothballed, unable to be turned on during a blackout, and it will also have the effect of stabilising the system because you'll have more firm generation in the system. You'll be able to play your renewables into that market. You'll have a cleaner, more affordable, more secure system. Everybody knows it. The chief scientist recommends it, and we should just get on and do it. Now, having said all that, that's not going to happen. So we're going to have to take control of our own energy future, and we're in the last stages of putting our own plan together, and it will do those three things. It will make energy cleaner, cheaper and more secure, and I hope to be saying something about that in the coming weeks.
We have
I'm Brianna from Scotch College. You briefly touched on the new Royal Adelaide Hospital, and I was just wondering how you think that's going to improve the healthcare industry into the future.
Thank you. It's a great question. We'll be a state-of-the-art hospital, and so instead of having a rabbit warren down the road, we'll have a first-class tertiary quaternary hospital, which will have the very best facilities. At a basic level, its facilities will be world-class. So you'll see single rooms, which will assist with infection control and increase the efficiency of the way in which particular patients are dealt with. You'll see facilities which are state-of-the-art in terms of their new technical equipment, designed very much with the input of clinicians to ensure that they have the best possible care available. Infection control we improve through negative and positive pressure areas that assist in that issue. And I think probably, though, that one of the most exciting things is the proximity of that hospital to the rest of the essentially biomedical precinct. So, as I said, the medical school, Allied Health School, the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, so that whole precinct should be regarded as one organic whole as our clinicians move between their research opportunities and their clinical responsibilities, as students move between those and their teaching responsibilities. So it really is going to be a very exciting future for us here in South Australia. It also symbolises, I think, the modernisation of our healthcare system. There's been a massive effort in transforming our healthcare system. That's been controversial as we've sought to match up what we know from our clinical experience, and that is that scattering too many services over lots of sites leads to suboptimum clinical outcomes. What we want is people that are doing the same thing over and over again so they get very, very good at it, and you bring the right patient to the right hospital and you get the right service first time. And that's what the reconfiguration of the whole network will give us, and the centrepiece of that will be the new Royal Adelaide Hospital. So what we know now is that the differentials between stroke survival rates at different hospitals are frighteningly different. And it's got to do with essentially the clinicians who have the regular experiences. Same with heart attacks. So in the old days, it was really about getting you in the back of an ambulance and getting you to the nearest hospital. That was going to correlate with your best chances of medical outcome. Now it's more important to be at the right hospital. And so we've increased the number of ambulances in the system to make sure that people can come to the right hospital. Ambulances are now no longer transport vehicles. They're essentially paramedics, mini ICUs on wheels in many cases. It's a complete change in what we can now do for people. So the hospital network, which was a 1950s, 60s hospital network, has to catch up with what medical technology can now do for people. In the old days, a stroke was death or serious disability. These days, you can walk out of the hospital within hours. It's a massive change in what we can do for people, but it depends on getting to the right care first time.
You mentioned the importance or the fact that there's a negative view sometimes being expressed about this state and some of the developments. You mentioned a host of really positive statistics. I just wondered if what advice could you give people in this room as to how we might contribute to then changing that narrative?
I think we've got to talk about the good things that are happening in South Australia. I mean, we can't be Pollyanna. We need to face up to our challenges. But I think the dial has shifted a little bit too far the other day. I mean, I found it a little hard to understand. On the day that I was announcing 140 jobs at a food manufacturing plant, and it was sad that we were talking about in 2 years' time 180 jobs going at Coca-Cola. But the very next day, we had quite a lot of prominence given to the closure of Caroma, which had been announced 3 years ago. It was just the last phase of the closure of a factory. And it seemed like for every bad story, there is prominence that's given to that is nothing like the prominence that's given to other elements that are positive. So, for instance, there was very little coverage of Oz Minerals shifting its head office from Melbourne to South Australia. Yet, if a company moves the other way, there's very substantial prominence given. In the same street as Coca-Cola, there's West End Brewery, and Swan Lager shifted from Perth. It's now being brewed at West End Brewery. That got very little prominence. So it seems that we're very up for bad news and not so prepared to assimilate good news. This is something that I don't know what the answer is. I try my best, and I suppose I encourage everybody to talk about things where they can. If they can't get it through the mainstream media, there are other platforms now to promote positive stories about South Australia.
I think we have time for probably the last question.
Premier, Trudy Hutchko from Grain Producers SA, and also on the Governor's Leadership Foundation program this year. I appreciate your support and desire for a vibrant city of Adelaide, but what are your government's goals for regional South Australia? A vibrant Adelaide city is not necessarily going to close that rural-urban divide that we have at the moment, where we've some amazing businesses out in the regions, but even their internet is second class.
Yeah. When I talk about the city as being an economic driver for the state, I want every South Australian to be proud of the City of Adelaide as the arrowhead for the whole of our state. And an investment in the City of Adelaide shouldn't be seen as an investment to the exclusion of the regions. I think it is, in a crowded international marketplace, your arrowhead is your capital city. And so that's the first thing, is to be proud of this, your city, your capital city. The second thing is that, where obviously a short presentation like this doesn't give us the opportunity to speak about all the important things that are happening, but just to touch on, just to give you a quick whiz around the state in terms of its regions. I mean, the food industry, which is largely a regional industry, and it's growing at an extraordinary rate. We're doing amazing things in the Port Pirie. Port Pirie smelter was about to close through lead pollution. It's gone from being the ugly duckling of the Near Star network to be the centre of its international operations with a multi-metal processing plant, courtesy of a co-investment program with the South Australian Government. We're working on a similar package for Arium. Old steelworks, hopefully rebirthed into an exciting new advanced manufacturing facility. You've seen what's happened at Port Augusta, the closure of the power station, but in almost the same horizon, you see Sundrop Farms, the largest solar thermal greenhouse in the Southern Hemisphere and one of the most efficient in the world, creating jobs for hundreds of people in that regional town. The Riverland, the structural adjustment package we put for the Murray-Darling Basin Plan is revitalising the Riverland community. In Mount Gambier, the fears about the forward sale of the forestry products have not materialised. There are more people working in forestry now than ever before, and the new private owner is investing again in that sector. So we take seriously our obligations to the regions, and there are some exciting things happening in regional South Australia.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for the questions. It's now my great pleasure to welcome to the stage KPMG's Con Tragakis to offer the vote of thanks to the Premier. Thank you.